Hi, my name is Chris. I'm from 27 Software. You can find us online at 27software.com. And today I'd like to spend a few minutes discussing our custom ORM tool and how it can help you. So the code generator itself is at version 6 currently, and it's just a Microsoft Visual Studio 2012 application. It was generated in C#. And I've been working on this for about 5 or 6 years, and you can actually see that the version 6 of the generator was actually generated from its predecessor, version 5 code generator. So I'll start it up here. You can see that it has a project-based concept, so you can have multiple different projects, as most people do. And as an example, I'll load the schema for our Oracle demo. We support 2 database providers currently, Oracle and SQL Server, but we can easily add more. I'll show you a SQL Server one here. The model's a little bit bigger, so it takes a bit longer to load, but you can configure all the tables. These are derived tables now that the code generator recognizes, and you can see that it understands the difference between a custom table, lookup table, or an intersection table. And the idea is that you can you select what entities you wish to generate code for, and in this case I'll select all the logic layers, say unit test, and then I just generate the code, and we're off to the races. So now we're going to switch over to what was actually generated from the code generator. In this case, we've generated the Oracle person. You can see there's 5 projects in this particular solution, and actually 4 of them were either generated or included in the code generator. The logic is the bulk. The framework is a framework package that has been around for about 10 years now that I always include, and you get the source code with it. There we can generate unit test projects and web services, but I'll talk about that in a bit. For now, I want to discuss the context. Context is a very important concept in the code generator, and it allows you to modify things at an abstract level. So for an example, this is the application context. You set things like what's the application name, what currency format you want to use, the date format, and any schema, as well as this initializes the other logging context and exception context. So let's jump over to the data context, arguably the most important context of an application. The idea is that, what database am I connecting to and what type of database it is. For instance, here we have an Oracle database. If I wanted to change the database provider to a SQL Server, I would literally change it in this one spot. Everything else is abstracted, so nowhere else does it know the code doesn't even know what application or data context we're using. I just showed you the data connection string there. So that's what's going on there. Then we'll jump over to the exception context. Exception context, again, for the application, it determines what type of if an exception is thrown, do we log it to a log file, do we put it to the event log, or do we want to email somebody? So that's where all that's configured. And there's an actual logging context built into the whole system as well, all the generated code. It allows you to set the logging context, the detail level, whether it's verbose or none or regular, as well as where to log it to. All these parameters can be configured in whatever application configuration you have. So Visual Studio comes with this for every application. In this case, I jumped over to a web-based one, but all of them are optional. But you can see where, in this case, I'm any exceptions I send to file and email, but not the event log. Where do I want to send the emails to? Where do I want to send the log to? Even the format of the log. So let's take a quick look at the actual generated code now before we proceed with the actual demonstration of it functioning. First of all, you'll notice that in the solution or in the project there's a generated folder of some entities and some non-entities. I'm not going to go into the non-entity generated related code, but it's stuff like data access, different types of extensions, web extensions, utilities, generic stuff like that. So you'll notice for each object there is a individual folder which contains a few classes for it. In this case, this is just the entity description, and you'll see it has things like the link mapping and even display name, all the things required for easier data access. And it obviously has different type specific things. We take nullable data types, date times, basically decimals, every type of different variable that's available. And it generates things like for every decimal it will generate a as currency property, so because often in the user interface you'll need to display something as currency, and of course it uses the context currency format. So if you wanted to change application wide, you just go back to that context as we talked about a few minutes ago. We also generate a metadata class, so this has things regarding mandatory information about the class, well, a list of columns itself, what's read-only, what's unique, and what we do is we initialize this metadata. Excuse me. We initialize the metadata, and which is all done for you through the code generator. So, but it can be all overridden, and so you can consume this metadata in any way you want from the user interface. The idea being that if you want to extend it to some other user interface that doesn't currently exist, you can use this metadata to do so in a programmatic way, as opposed to a one-off typing way. We also give you functions like get value and set value, which uses reflection if you want to update the entities in a reflective sort of way. Then we have a class which extends the entity. So in .NET these are called extensions, and it allows you to do things like load child objects, etc. But it extends the object, which is different than a method call. So for example, when I get a person, this is some code we're going to review in a second. If I want to load the roles, I can just go with person x roles. And what's pretty cool is we do also the extensions for a list of people. So if you also have a collection, you can also go with person x roles. So all this is now is saying it's deep loading these objects, and you can daisy chain these together. There might be with status and with whatever. So that's just another pattern we tend to use. And then into the real guts of it, we have the actual logic base, which is just a collection of methods. This object is fairly simple, but it gets more complex as there are more keys and more relationships. So things like gets by primary key, insert, update, stuff like that. Now just quickly to show you that this really is all generated code. It looks like a human wrote it. It looks like a very senior developer wrote it. I'm going to delete some code and save that file. I'm going to switch over to the code generator, and this is the project that we've selected. I'm just going to click generate again. It's quite quick. There you go. It's actually done the generation now. And you'll notice that this says, hey, something's changed, so we can reload it. And sure enough, as of I think it was 11:04 it was, and we look at our there it is, 11:04:01. Sure enough, it's 11:04. So really, this entire class has been rewritten, just like that. Finally, before we finish, I'm going to talk to you a little about the actual an example of some code. For instance, persist. Notice first of all that the persist method is the public method, and the insert and updates are private. So what that means is that our ORM tool generates code that's aware of whether an object needs to be updated or inserted. The user doesn't even have to care. So for instance, in this case, we validate the object, which of course it consumes the metadata to know how to validate the object, and then whether it's new or not, which is again you can see using an extension, it decides whether to insert or update that person. Now finally, we're going to get to how the code generator code is consumed and how easy it is to consume. You can see that I just wrote a simple console app for testing purposes or demonstration purposes on our existing project that we've been looking at. So there is a select test, and as an example, to get all the records, you just do personLogic.getAll, or you can get a single by ID. We even have a toString, which is actually an extension of the object, which comes in handy. To insert an object, you create a new object, you set the properties as you see fit, and notice there's of course data types, and you go persist. It returns a persist response object, which is a rich object which has a collection of things like an entity, messages, positive and negative, etc. And it could even be extended as well as with everything else in the code generated. To update, here you see me selecting an object again. You set the property that you want, in this case first name, I set it to my name, and I can just persist. Finally, you can of course write custom code, custom extensions. In this case I wrote one that says get by where, and you can pass in a where clause, and you can call that of course, and it's a very similar type of interface. In this case I'm looping through them. Now I'm showing you an example of an actual MVC web UI hookup. This is probably a little bit more realistic. So there's our MVC project with controllers and views and whatnot. And in this case, we're just updating a customer. One special property gets set, but in reality all we're really just doing is again calling the generator, the code generator code customer logic.persist. And what that actually looks like on the web UI, here's my customer screen. And so if I say break a business rule, that's actually coming through the code generator, through the built-in validation, the message and everything, whereas if I put in a valid thing, it persists. So, and that's actually going through there. Works fairly well and nice and smooth. So in summary, what I'd like you to take away is you are going to save massive amounts of time and hence money by using this tool. You can greatly increase the developer productivity by allowing the developer to focus on what makes your business and the project special and ignoring the crud stuff. Improved business support and satisfaction through improved developer satisfaction. A happy developer will lead to a happier business, and you can produce higher quality, consistent, stable, and faster results. And you can handle larger projects with ease. In fact, the larger the project, the more value the generator will have. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me at any time. Thanks.